afternoon, everyone. My name is Ferraiuolo, and today I'll be building upon the Children's Crusade, one of the lesser known of the Crusades. So, how many Crusades do you guys think there actually were? Like, just shout out a couple of numbers. How many do you think there were?
8.
You're actually really close. There were 8 actual Crusades, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the Children's Crusade. It was commenced in the year 1212. It took place between the 4th and 5th Crusades, and you can see the dates I have posted up there. The starting points originated in Vendôme and Cologne in France. And technically, the Children's Crusade was not a crusade because it was not issued by the Pope, and I'll build a little bit on that in a bit. But it is like the least known of all the Crusades. Like, here's a map of all the Crusades. You can see that the Children's Crusade is not on there, which is why I have this one. Because this is the Children's Crusades, the routes that it took. So, the idea of issuing the Children's Crusade was started by a shepherd boy of age 12 from Orléans named Stephen, who claimed he was visited by Saint Denis, who is the patron saint of Paris. And Saint Denis comes to him with a message for King Philip from Christ himself. And the message that Saint Denis has for King Philip is as follows, as coming from Stephen Runciman's The Children's Crusades article on the history of the Crusades website. The seas would dry up before them, and they would pass, like Moses through the Red Sea, safe to the Holy Land. So basically this was saying, go to Jerusalem, take back the Holy Land, and, the way you're going to get there is the Red Sea is going to split into, just like it did for Moses and the Hebrews in the book of Exodus. King Philip thought that this was a ridiculous idea and did not endorse it whatsoever. So Stephen decided to take it into his own hands. He basically preached about this crusade all over France, and it inspired so many children, 30,000, no older than age 12, from all over France, came to Vendôme to march on Jerusalem with Stephen. Now, once the crusade actually began, one of their first stops was in Genoa, and this is where they expected the Red Sea to split. Obviously it didn't, otherwise we wouldn't have the problem that we had. So the Genoese natives offered citizenship to the children who didn't want to go back home but couldn't go forward or didn't want to continue the journey. And many of the children actually took up this offer, mainly the young girls, just because this was more of like a man's job, but no one was older than age 12, so it was just kind of like, okay, we don't really want to go home yet, so we'll just chill out here. And the news of this crusade spread to more than just all over France. It spread to the Rhineland in Germany, which is where Nicholas comes in. He's from a smaller village in Rhineland country, and he accompanies Stephen on the crusades. But when they get to Genoa, that's where they decide to split into 2 parties. Stephen takes half of the children on ships across the Red Sea from Pisa, heading towards Palestine, whereas Nicholas took the rest of the children to Rome, where Pope Innocent received the children with open arms. They explained their mission, and he was like, this is ridiculous, but you're welcome to stay here. So there's an image of Moses parting the Red Sea, which is what they thought was going to happen, but it didn't. So there's a couple of images of the children. Not much was known about the return journey from this crusade, but in the year 1230, there was a young priest. Several young priests had accompanied these children along the way, because 30,000 kids no older than 12, that's kind of crazy to be unaccompanied by any sort of adult. So these priests had accompanied them, but since there's not much known about the return journey, we don't really know a lot of information, but one of the priests who came with them returned to France, and his story of what happened is not a happy story. The the children who were on the boats, there was a very big storm, and many of the ships were shipwrecked and there were no survivors. But the remaining ships that were not, that didn't shipwreck were taken under siege by Saracen warriors when they got closer to, I believe it was Palestine. But the Saracens took all these children and sold them into captivity and slavery. They were bought and sold as slaves as the Saracens saw fit. And then the priests who accompanied them, they were transported to Egypt, where Frankish priests were more valued as slaves and educated servants. Learning about this particular crusade, since there's not a lot known about this crusade, it's really hard to say if there were any benefits that we see today from this crusade. First of all, it technically wasn't a crusade in the first place, since it wasn't issued by Pope Innocent, and a 12-year-old claimed to be visited by a decapitated saint about a mission from Christ to go through the Red Sea just as Moses had to save the Holy Land. That's kind of far-fetched to me, and so did King Philip. Second of all, there were 30,000 kids going on their own with little to no combat training. None of them were older than the age of 12, so they didn't really know what they were heading for. They didn't really know what was going to be happening. They either became Genoese citizens or Saracen slaves, neither of which is kind of an ideal result. Not many, I don't really think any returned to France after this event took place, other than the one priest in 1230 who came back and recounted everything that happened. But there is little known information about this crusade just because it lasted 2 years max, and since it technically wasn't a crusade, it wasn't logged and cataloged and as researched as the other crusades were. But since there's little known about this crusade, it was really difficult to find any beneficial results that we can see today that came out of this crusade. And there are my sources. Are there any questions? Great, thank you.